Hello everyone. So I just briefly touched on Leo's comments in the Dáil today. And first of all, I welcome that finally they have finally noticed, like I've been saying for years and years and years, that we don't have the necessary means to defend the Irish state, in defence wise on the ground and at sea and in the air. And I've been saying that for years. And the first step, and this is what Leo needs to do, and the army needs to, the defence forces and the state needs to get done straight away, is that you give the army a proper wage, you give them a proper living wage, and maybe that might encourage more people to go into the army. What if about equipment and things like that? It's sorting that out first, getting them a sustainable wage, because again you see the lack of numbers going down throughout the years. It was 10,000 at one stage, now it's under 8,000, going nearly 7,000. That's all that's in the defence forces in Ireland. And it is recommended for a country nearly 5 million people. It is probably recommended there's about 50,000 soldiers, and there should be 50,000 army personnel. And obviously there should be bigger equipment, and obviously if the wages went up, more people would be encouraged to join the army. Because there's a lot of young people who would probably be interested in joining the army. I know a good few young people probably would join, but the pay and conditions is, you might as well, not join, to be totally honest, because if you're going to live in that, the way they were treated and things like that, members of the army in terms of pay and things like that. People left to go to Tesco because the pay wasn't good enough. And that's it. That tells you all you need to know. But again, Leo's comments today in the Dáil, just want to talk about it, and particularly the last bit he said about if Ireland was attacked. For 70 years we thought, the United Kingdom, the US would come in if we were attacked, and it didn't look like it because there's not many countries around us basically that would attack us. It doesn't, as more or less said, it doesn't really look like they would actually come in if we were attacked, the United Kingdom. But I would say this just before I say anything else. It is a threat when Ireland is attacked by any country, or any country attacks Ireland. It's a threat to UK's security, because obviously the UK is right beside us. So the UK would definitely probably not sit idle, because again, Northern Ireland, if the Republic of Ireland is taken by a foreign enemy, technically they probably would go for the UK then, because they have a bridge to Northern Ireland to get to the UK. So if that makes any sense. So, they would probably get involved, and particularly Uncle Sam in America. I don't think 30 something million Irish people in America would go down very well, and I don't think it will go down with the US establishment, because, again, compared to the Ukraine, Ireland has a long history with the United States. And, huge amount of Irish people over there. And obviously, huge amount of Irish people went to fight with the Union Army during the American Civil War. It's a long, long history the Irish have in America, of building America, of building really America, of building all the skyscrapers in America, building bridges, building infrastructure, working on very little money. The Irish really technically built America, to be totally honest with you, because they worked for little money and they built America, they worked hard. But yeah, so I do think America wouldn't stand by and let Ireland be invaded, because again, because Ireland is in a strategic role on the Atlantic, and I don't think they would let a foreign enemy take a base of operations in the near the Atlantic, where they could reach Canada, can reach the United States, they can reach Greenland, um, you know, and two, because obviously the US uses Shannon Airport, which obviously it's debatable at the moment. We should probably let them, but that too, if that makes any sense. So they wouldn't be too fond of that, and I suppose Joe Biden, even at the moment, even we probably make laugh and things like that, he is an Irish American, I suppose, and I don't think he would let that happen. Because Ireland again has a long-standing history with the United States, more than Ukraine, because Ukraine was obviously only 30 years free compared to Ireland. Obviously Ireland's only 100 years free, but we have a long history of people going during the famine over to the United States, making a life for themselves, and building America, working hard, and making it through to be mayors and going up the American hierarchy. So yeah, let's listen to Leo.
And I think one thing we need to do as well, which we haven't done enough of in recent years, is to start defending our system a bit more. And our system is the system of the West. It's based on a liberal democracy, it's based on the rule of law, it's based on the social market economy, and it's based on multinationalism, or multilateralism rather, in international affairs. And it's not a perfect system. And I know that, and we have lots of problems. But there's nobody trying to climb over walls or climb into dinghies to get into China or Russia or North Korea or Cuba or Venezuela or Iran or any of those places. And I think we need to recognise the fact that we're very fortunate to live in a social market economy, in a liberal democracy, fortunate to be part of an organisation like the European Union and the United Nations. And if anything, this attack on Ukraine should be a wake-up call for all of us to defend our system and be willing to defend it, because the system worth building is worth defending. If the European Union was worth building, it's worth defending. And if our independence was worth securing, it's also worth defending.
Yeah, but this is the thing Leo needs to understand. A lot of young people, and I heard this many times, they wouldn't defend the state of this country. Because they haven't a life in this country. Why would they defend themselves in debt to a state that treats them like dog shit? Like, let's be fair. They treat young people in this country like dog shit. They treat you and I, the only citizen of Ireland, like dog shit, the state. Like, what would, and a lot of people would agree with what I'm saying. Why would people take up arms to defend the state and to go back and maybe fight off the enemy, and the state treats the taxpayer like shit again? So people would think it that way compared to maybe in other countries. Because a lot of young people don't have a house, they don't have a roof over their head, they're living at home, they can't afford a car, they can't afford to make a living. They can't afford to build a life for themselves in the state. And then you look at the people who can't even afford to get a house. All these issues, and I don't think people would be willing to take up arms and die for the Irish state because of the state of it at the moment. Which is unfortunate because, again, as Leo rightly, and again, I do agree with Leo on this, what was the point in fighting for independence and letting a foreign enemy come into the country and take it over? It would all be for nothing to what people died for years ago. But again, I think a lot of people now, because it's a very different kettle of fish now, 100 years ago, they thought hopefully that we would be free and that we'd be better life on our own, and that we wouldn't have a foreign country ruling over us and telling us what to do. And that turned out to be that in 100 years later we're dealing with just a mess of a country, which is unfortunate because we had it all and we sold it away, and that's to be totally honest with you. We had everything and we just sold everything away. We just sold the country away, to be totally honest. Like, we had it all going for us, but we just were careless and we just didn't give a shit about the future generations, and that's what happened. But yeah, I would say to people, if it did ever come to the worst, I would say to people to take up arms and bleed the enemy dry as much as humanly possible. God forbid, hopefully never happens, but to make them suffer if they do invade this country, make them lose as many men as humanly possible whoever invades this country. If the God forbid it never happens, but if it does ever happen, we have to be ready to bleed them dry, whoever they are.
And like you, I don't agree that we should increase defence spending up to €3 billion. I think that would be too much.
Well, too much, dear. See, they say now we should increase defence spending, but 3 billion isn't a lot. I know 3 billion is a lot for defence, but compared to even Luxembourg spends more of its GDP. Ireland spent 0.52 of its GDP on defence, which is very, very little, the lowest in the European Union. Even Estonia, a country with very little money and things like that, 2.something%. But you could say they were NATO, of course, you could argue that too. But Luxembourg spends 1.7% of their GDP on defence. Luxembourg, out of all the countries, a small country in the middle of Europe, they spend 1.7% of its GDP on defence. And Ireland, that's really technically on its own, that has no military alliances or anything like that. But Luxembourg is obviously, a neutral country too, obviously, a big European finance capital too. And obviously, Belgium probably has guarantees on Luxembourg, and the same with France. Because obviously they're a very neutral country, they're a small country, so obviously they would probably. And then the middle of Europe, and it doesn't look likely they would be aggressors surrounded, because they're surrounded by Belgium, Germany, and France, so basically 3 countries which would say they get on very well, and obviously the European members too. So yeah, compared to Ireland, it's in the middle of the ocean, so somebody could just land.
There are other priorities and other demands, but I do think we need to increase defence spending. We need to pay our military personnel more, we need better equipment, we need to be able to guard our own seas, we need to be able to have radar over our own airspace. And the assumption that we've made for 70 years now is that nobody would attack us because we're a country that's neutral militarily. Ukraine was neutral militarily. It wasn't part of any military alliance. It was attacked because it was politically part of the West, or at least wanted to be politically part of the West. And we make the assumption that even if we are attacked, the British and the Americans will come and save us anyway. And I'm not sure that's the kind of assumption a sovereign country like ours should make.
But I understand what he's saying about Ukraine, but Ukraine obviously had a decently sized military, and had tanks, had heavy weaponry. In other words, compared to Ireland, had an air force. They had an air force compared to Ireland. Ireland is neutral as it can get. To be totally honest, like even Switzerland has the bigger defense force than Ireland. But again, Switzerland would be a hell of a country to invade because it's mountains and there's fortresses in the mountains, bunkers underneath the mountains. But compared to Ireland as neutral as you can get, because Ireland is literally the lowest defence spending in Europe. Out of all the countries, you can say about Finland too, but the snow speaks Finnish over there when somebody invades. But technically Ireland is the most neutral I suppose in the European Union compared to if you take out Switzerland, because Switzerland's been neutral for over long times before Ireland. But this is the thing with Switzerland too, that you're all of a sudden now they're posing sanctions on Russia. For the first time in hundreds of years, Switzerland has taken a stance on something. But yeah, I don't think Ireland should take that stance. I think Ireland should just stay out of it. Because it's the benefit to the state just to stay out of it and not to get involved in any way. Just denounce it, of course, speak about how it gets, but not say too much about it, if that makes any sense, or do too much. But yeah, I agree with Leo on we should be able to defend our own airspace. We should be able to defend our own seas. We should be able to do all that. I agree 100% on Leo, and I definitely agree in pay. It's been something I was saying for years and years and years about pay. And I'm sure people would agree. I've been saying it for the last probably 6 years that pay needs to be restored in the army. We need to have good pay. And we need to recruit more into the army, and people will go to the army if the money is good enough. People are not going to work for nothing, and rightly so, because they have a life to pay for. And I know he says about 3 billion is far too much to spend on the vets, and to a certain extent I agree. But how much are we willing to spend? Because obviously we need to spend a good bit to get the military up to scratch, because it's in utter disrepair at the moment. The army, we have to admit that, particularly the navy, they haven't got the manpower to put ships in the water. And the docked and port. And then you look at the army, they have closed a lot of army barracks. It's a quest that we've lost over 2,000 members of the Defence Force over the last few years. It was used to be 10,000, now it's under 8,000, going near 7,000. So, it's a queer lot to rebuild, if that makes sense. It's particularly, as I said, in the Navy, it's a lot to rebuild. So, it's a lot. So it is going to cost a lot. But I do take, because again, we are going into uncertain times. We don't know what can come tomorrow. We should be ready. We should be ready, even if it's as a neutral country. We should have the means to be ready for whatever happens. And even just to have the defence forces, extra men, extra women, just in case, God forbid, a flood ever come or something would happen, a natural disaster or something like that. So the army be there ready to mobilise if something did happen, in terms of that too. Because it is necessary, and I suppose, again, as Leo said, and I do agree, at one time I ever agreed with Leo on something, that what was the point in fighting for independence? And again, I understand where he's come from, and I agree with him, that, what's the point in fighting for independence? So whatever, but the European Union couldn't give a shit about that. But our independence, it is definitely worth fighting for. Whatever about the state of the country at the moment, but fighting for what people fought for 100 years ago and give their lives so this country could be free. And for us to just let a country come in after 100 years and take that independence away from us, after people fighting so vigorously, like my great-grandmother, to secure that independence, it would be a sin to let them come in and take our independence away and subjugate us for how many more years. That's just my take on it, so yeah. But yeah, hopefully that it's just not talk. Hopefully he does it, because it needs to be done. But I have other things to talk with the army, because it's the main topic in this country at the moment. Thank you, everyone.